Hello and welcome to Business Incorporated live on Channels Television. It's a midweek trade today. Here's what's driving markets now. First, we discuss when a company can no longer pay its debt. Should creditors move swiftly to recover their money, or should the business be given a second chance to survive? And South Africa's financial regulator opens governance probe into Africa's largest asset manager after the CEOs and other top executives were suspended. And investors are closely watching developments around the Strait of Hormuz as intensified U.S. strikes have raised fresh concerns. It's good to have you join us. I'm Ladi Williams. Let's kick off now with what's playing out with commodities that we track now. We see oil prices actually extending their rally for a third consecutive session as renewed geopolitical tension in the Middle East. That's fueling concerns over global energy supplies. Markets are reacting after U.S. President Donald Trump threatened additional military strikes against Iran. And we're seeing the impact right there. WTI starting to cross over $80 per barrel again, 0.89% higher. Brent crude with a bigger 1.07% advance, 85.64. At this point, seems like it's heading to 90. Hopefully, there's some de-escalation at this time to reverse that. Natural gas, 0.34%, 2.91 higher. Looks like it's heading for $3 at this point. Let's get a check on metals now. Gold prices, they slipped today with rising tensions in the Middle East. You know, the strengthening expectations that inflation could remain elevated and keep U.S. interest rates higher for longer. And, you know, after, getting a green move yesterday, was seeing spot gold pulling back 0.89%. At some point, it did fall below the $4,000 level. Spot silver, 1.29% lower, $58.34 per ounce. Platinum, 0.57. So it's all red across board there for most of the metals that we're tracking at this time. Keep our eyes on that. So some other stories now. Plans by Dangote, that's billionaire Aliko Dangote, to build a 700,000 barrel per day refinery on Kenya's coast, facing early environmental opposition. Greenpeace Africa warns the proposed project in Lamu could threaten sensitive maritime ecosystems, including mangroves, coral reefs, and seagrass beds that support local livelihoods and coastal protection there. And looking at the borders now, Nigeria Customs Service says better communication is key to raising more revenue and tackling smuggling. This is just as 70 public relations officers of the service were inducted into the Nigerian Institute of Public Relations. The Comptroller General of Customs, Adewale Adeni, said the service needs professional communicators to explain its reforms, promote trade compliance, and change public perception about customs. The CGC noted that accurate information will help businesses comply, increase government revenue, and support ongoing operations against smuggling. NIPR President Dr. Ike Neliaku also commended Customs for investing in certified communication professionals. To project its achievements, the Customs Service says the new PR team will play a central role in its revenue drive and campaign. And the national president of the Nigerian Association of Chambers of Commerce, Industry, Mines and Agriculture, Mr. Jani Ibrahim, is seeking partnership in addressing the nation's infrastructure challenge. Mr. Ibrahim was speaking at a conference on infrastructure, says federal government's plan towards attaining the $1 trillion economy is hinged on the ability to provide infrastructure which serves as an engine for economic growth and development. Take a listen.
Nigeria has one of Africa's largest markets, an energetic and innovative youth population, abundant natural resources, and entrepreneurs with global ambitions. What remains is the infrastructure to unlock them, and NASIMA stands ready to work with every stakeholder in this room to make that happen.
Former Minister of National Planning, Shamsuddin Usman, appeals for a more coordinated approach in the provision of infrastructure, which according to him will involve some level of interconnectivity.
At Lagos, the railway stopped at Ebutometa. The port was not connected with the railway. The airport is sitting in Ikeja. So three key items of infrastructure. The seaport is there, and all of them just sitting in different parts of Lagos, not connected at all. So we're talking of integrated infrastructure, such that the air, the rail, the road, the sea, everything. And then you use, for example, the rail line to have telecommunications, pipelines, and so on, oil pipeline, everything integrated.
All right, now to our first conversation. Receivership remains one of the most contentious issues in Nigeria's business landscape. While creditors argue they must recover loans to protect depositors, shareholders, and the financial system, many believe receivership often destroys otherwise viable businesses, costing jobs, investment, and economic value. So should the law prioritize debt recovery or business rescue? And is it time for Nigeria to embrace corporate rescue mechanisms such as administration? To explore these questions now, we're joined by Amala Umeke, a partner, turnaround and restructuring at Strennan Bland Partners. Joins me right here in the studio. Great to have you, Amala.
Thank you, Larry.
Yeah, so looking at non-performing loans, that's from the banks there, we see the NPL limit supposed to be about 5%. And you see businesses, a couple of individuals there trying to, get loans, and that has taken the NPL ratio to 9.85%, way above that limit. And most of the time, some of these businesses believe they're going to make this humongous profit and all of that, but sometimes, things change. But with that change, a lot of, other parties are impacted. So talk to me about receivership. It's becoming so controversial right now, but is that the right path?
Thank you, Larry, for having me. I don't think it's the right path, but I think there was a question you asked, right? Whether we should prioritize recovery for creditors or viable business. And I think, if you look at the landscape now, even within the legal circle, there appears to be those who are pro-creditors, those who are pro-businesses, those who are saying, oh, this money was lent to this particular company, they must pay. We have to use any means to get them to pay. And those who are saying, oh, those businesses, you are destroying it and all that. The reality is that you don't have to. In fact, my theory is that Nigeria as an economy cannot afford to be either pro-creditors or pro-companies, right? We must find a balance, right? We cannot prioritize creditor recovery over the companies, and we cannot also prioritize the companies over the creditors, because essentially, we must be able to ensure that the creditors recover their monies at the end of the day. At the same time, we should be able to say, while trying to recover this money, that you won't destroy this business. And what receivership does, because that's its fundamental nature, is that it destroys businesses. The receiver who is just appointed, whether it's a receiver or a receiver manager, fundamentally is just there to receive on behalf of one creditor. So some of the more altruistic intentions that you would typically want to have inbuilt in it is not there. So as a fundamental foundation of its legal principle is that it's just there to recover money on behalf of one creditor, and the system, the way it's built, doesn't actually care how it goes about that particular recovery. And so that's why some of us are saying there has to be a more sensible approach to it. Nigeria as a country cannot afford to say, oh, we are going to adopt a receivership, a pro-receivership stance, or no, we cannot afford to have a pro-receivership stance, and therefore we should just be protecting companies at the expense of the creditors. There has to be a balance, and luckily, and I'm going to talk about it, luckily, we now have that balance under our law.
All right, so for some of our viewers who don't understand what a receivership is, help us break it down. It's a business now. A business is going through some storms, the bird money, from different platforms, institutions, but they're not making money, at this point. Who is the receiver? How does that work?
So essentially what happens is the banks, the lenders who has lent that particular money, the secured creditor, would appoint somebody under the underlying agreement, would have somebody who would be able to take over the assets of the company and then liquidate those assets and use those assets and pay the loans or the debt that is being owed to that particular creditor. So the fundamental issue there is that the person who is being appointed is actually working for that particular creditor, for that particular single person, and he's paying, practically paying the way they say it, he who pays the piper dictates the tune. So that is essentially what happens in that particular scenario. So the focus of that particular person who has been appointed is to go in and, as much as possible, recover through the assets of the company the monies that is being owed to that particular
lender. And in that recovery, if it means destroying the business, that works.
Exactly. In fact, I was reading something that a colleague wrote, and the person was deriding the concept of receivership and saying that there has to be a change. And I said to myself that the problem this person doesn't understand is that fundamentally, from a legal principle standpoint, that is actually what receivership does. And that is why we borrowed our company law from England. It's not a hidden thing. So these concepts, insolvency, receivership, that are borrowed from England. If you go to England where we borrowed it, receivership has been largely abolished, since 2003. In fact, when we were drafting CAMA, because I worked on when it was still a bill, the recommendation from World Bank actually was that receivership should be abolished in Nigeria. Don't ask me why it wasn't abolished, but that was a strong, and for someone like me, I believe strongly that should be abolished in Nigeria.
Was it possible the banks wouldn't want that?
So essentially, and that's why, when I was invited, I said I would come. If banks, because that is also what has happened everywhere in the world, understand that there is a mechanism that allows them to still recover. And if you look at it critically, receivership and some of the more abrasive mechanisms that you have, for creditors, it's actually not the best, because whenever you do distress sales, the principle is that you get 30 cents on a dollar, because it's distress, right? But there are now concepts, there are now mechanisms that can allow you recover sensibly up to 100% or more at the end of the day when you use some of these mechanisms. So if some of the creditors understand that there are now mechanisms available within Nigerian law that allows them to do these recoveries, that allows them to get their money, because importantly, we must have a system. That's why I keep saying that you cannot have a pro-creditor or a pro-company system. You must have a system that allows creditors to be able to recover their money. Otherwise, Nigeria as a country will collapse.
Is it possible for both parties to actually win? When we say all parties, creditors.
Exactly. And the company.
The company.
So that is what the law, in trying to bring in administration, has done. A win-win system that allows the creditors, not just one creditor, but whether you are secured, whether you are unsecured, whether you're a trade creditor, and also the company, to deal with the issue of distress in a very sensible manner that allows the creditors to still get their money fully, and then still allows the company to survive if it still is viable business. And if it's not a viable business, of course, the company will now go through a sensible dissolution of such a company or a sensible distribution of its assets.
So is it possible for receivership and administration to work together?
No, that's the thing. Because fundamentally, receivership is a debt recovery mechanism, whereas it is focused on the assets. And that's one of the problems that people are trying to import in administration, and that's why some people like us are pushing back. Administration is a pro-value system. It looks at the enterprise of that particular company. It looks at the business of the company and says, can we rescue this particular business? If the problem of that company, because you can't just shield companies, and that's one thing which I need people to understand, that administration is not a free pass for directors of the company. If you have an administrator who's been appointed, who is not acting for any of the creditors, who is an officer of the court, under the supervision of the court, who would go in and tell everyone the truth of the matter. If the problem of the company is that the directors are taking the monies of the company, flying business class to Monaco and all that,
private jets.
Exactly, they will be removed. Administration is the only tool under the Nigerian company law that allows a person called the administrator to appoint and remove directors. So it creates a win-win system that is focused on the viability of the business, not the assets. And that's why if you have an administrator who goes in and is looking for the assets of the company, shutting down business, that person is just doing a hangover of receivership.
Right. But do we have some success stories in Nigeria, going through the administrator route?
Well, the point is that it's a new, it shouldn't be new now, it's been there since 2020, but it's still a new concept, right? We've had a few success stories, at least the ones I've done, but I think the better question would be to ask where we got it from, which is in England. Are their success stories? And why? What will show you the success stories is that do the statistics, you would hardly find any receivership in England again. Most of the insolvency route that's been taken is administration. They call receivership administrative receivership in England. I think last year there wasn't any, maybe one, right? The rest were all administration. So that shows you that there should be a paradigm shift. In Nigeria, there are a few success stories, and why is it still few? It's because people do not know about it. And secondly, even those who are practicing it still practice it as though it's receivership. So there is still resistance on the part of the creditors and on the part of the companies.
All right, so why should ordinary Nigerians care?
Oh, we should, actually.
About this?
We should. So look at it from a business perspective. If the business, somebody has been appointed to supervise, the person has shut down the company's building, obviously jobs are lost. Suppliers, everybody goes in for that. Now, if you also have a system, because when I talk to credit, I said, if you shut down this building, if you've shut down this particular business, does that actually get you your money? Okay, you shut it down. Have you now gotten your money? So if we have that system where people are still fighting using receivership as a tool to expropriate businesses, what you then find is that even the creditors don't get paid. And when they don't get paid, they are not able to, you've mentioned the MPLs and all that, right? They are not able to have the resources to lend money to me and you and ordinary Nigerians. So the entire society is down for it. And the reality is that I keep saying we cannot afford an AMCON 2, right? I have a very controversial view when it comes to AMCON. We shouldn't even have AMCON in the first place. And so we must create a legal system.
That's the receiver leader.
Exactly, right. So we should create a system, don't say I said, right? But we should create a system that allows the sensible restructuring of businesses, allows the sensible rescue of businesses, allows the sensible and orderly creation of a system that allows businesses to continue thriving when they are going through distress.
Right. I guess this is why we need some of these businesses to be rescued.
Exactly.
Share of the business over 96% there. That's when you look at Smedan, MBS estimates their employment contribution by 84%. That's some of these SMEs in Nigeria. GDP contribution 48%. So most of them need saving when they need to be saved.
Exactly. And the good thing is that when you save them, the employment ratio goes up. You have more persons in jobs because these businesses are not being driven away. And the major issue that the creditors will have, which is that, it's the directors of the company that have actually put this business in this particular position. At least you would have somebody who will go in and tell you the truth. Is it the directors that's actually the problem of this business? Or is it the economy? Or is it can be a variety of issues. And if it's the directors, for instance, the law then empowers, under the supervision of the court, the administrator to remove such a directors on board people who will be able to inspire confidence amongst the creditors and drive the business to growth. And if the business is not viable, at least the administrator will tell them the truth. I say, look, this business is no longer viable. Let's wind it down. But in winding it down, it's not a distress wind down, which is where creditors will lose value. It is an orderly wind down that gets the best value for these creditors at the end of the day.
So maybe you get $1 for $1.
Exactly.
All right, thank you so much. Amala Omeke, partner, turnaround and restructuring, Strand & Bland Partners.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Ladi, for having me.
All righty then. So, let's look at some more stories now. South Africa's financial regulator, they've launched an investigation into governance practices at the $219 billion Public Investment Corporation, Africa's largest fund manager. The probe follows the suspension of Chief Executive Patrick Dlamini and changes to the firm's investment leadership after whistleblower allegations of impropriety raised fresh concerns over governance and oversight. Let's flip over to the markets now. Let's see what's playing out. So for the NGX there, we see a nice 0.35% advance there intraday. Johannesburg Stock Exchange reclaiming the 110,000 level. Let's flip over to other parts of the market quickly now. EGX 30, 0.65% higher. Nairobi Stock Exchange, 0.61% down yesterday. Let's see what's happened for most of the, that's Middle East region now. For the Gulf region, the UAE is mixed sentiment right there, 0.24 for the Dubai index. Let's see the Qatari and Saudi Arabia there. I think that's still closed. That's for the Qatari index. Still that 0.13% advance from last time. Tadawul marginally down about 8 basis points. Let's flip over to the U.S. markets now. For the stock futures, looking pretty good at this point. Tech-heavy NASDAQ 0.43% higher. S&P futures 0.13%. Let's see Asia. Let's see what Asia did today. Fine recovery. Right there, the Kospi 6.24%, Hang Seng Index 1.40%, Nifty 50. Let's see if there's a recovery there for the Nifty 50 in India. Definitely was down yesterday. Talking about India. All right, you're not giving me that. All right, let's flip over to Europe now. Let's see what's happening in Europe. We have Lars Holter right there. Great to have you, Lars. How are the markets looking there?
Yeah, good to be with you, Ladi. Markets in Europe are in the red again on Tuesday, but there is really no corporate news out, no economic data that could give the market a lift. There's really nothing at all. So traders, they have to work with what they got, and that is mostly the same old look at Iran, the Strait of Hormuz, the lack of any developments, and that's pretty much why we're seeing this weakness.
All right, we see the closing of the Strait of Hormuz has become a major problem for global energy markets, as much of the world's oil and gas has shipped through that, waterway. But it's not the only waterway that's posed a problem right now. In Germany, it seems you have problems too. What can you tell us about that? And what's the problem? And why are people worried?
Yeah, it's interesting here, really, Ladi. Sometimes people don't realize how important waterways are in the global infrastructure, whether that is a strait or just a simple river. We've all witnessed it, of course, now with regards to Hormuz. But as for Germany, the River Rhine is a major transportation route. It's starting in Switzerland at its very first port, and then is running through the towns of Mannheim and Ludwigshafen north with its chemical industry, its machine building industry. It's running through the mining districts in North Australia, and then it connects all these places to the North Sea part of the Atlantic Ocean. And the Rhine is Europe's most important inland waterway. Really, at its peak, almost 300 million tons of freight were transported there every year. Much of it, of course, construction material, but also coal and petroleum products.
So what's the immediate fallout for the economy?
Well, the problem here we're seeing right now is really that we have these low water levels right now. I mean, we've talked the last couple of times, of course, here, Ladi, about the heat wave that we have, but it's not only a heat wave, it's a drought too, that clearly the Department of Environment says has to do with climate change, with changes in shifts in precipitation patterns and these drought periods that we're seeing. And now the problem is, of course, that ships can't even go on the river being fully loaded as we were used to, of course. So we are seeing less shipping on the river. And by the way, it's not even the only river. The Elbe that connects to the port of Hamburg has the same problem. The Danube that connects to the Black Sea has the same problem, all having less water levels. And that leads to, of course, delays in supply chains for many industry, and also leads to higher prices. Shipping prices are going up. And we have had one analyst out that actually just said that these higher transport costs due to more expensive shipping along the rivers, they just present another unwelcome headwind for the industrial sector that has just began to slowly stabilize. And that is really what's so painful here. The economy here in Germany, Ladi, we've discussed it many times, has seen some hard times. And just as things looked a little bit better, here comes the next problem. And since it has to do with climate change, it does not seem to be one that can't be easily resolved.
Right. I hope, once we solve the Strait of Hormuz problem, nothing else pops up at this time. We can't play with any waterway right now. Thank you so much, Lars.
Let's hope so. Thanks, Ladi.
All right, let's check out what's happening. Digital assets looking quite strong. Yeah, looking strong today. $65 reclaimed. That's for Bitcoin, 1.97% higher. Ethereum, I guess trying to make a run back to the $2,000 levels. Lost that for a while now, and it's been looking more comfortable under that. But 3.73% higher. Let's see if we make a run back there. BNB, $581. That was trading about $1,000 at some point. But yeah, the pullback there affecting most of the top cryptocurrencies on coin market cap. Let's look at some headlines now. A crypto startup is opening a new way for investors to bet on one of Asia's biggest upcoming IPOs. Trade.xyz has launched futures contracts linked to memory chip maker Shangjin Memory Technologies, giving global investors indirect exposure ahead of its highly anticipated Shanghai listing. The United States and the United Kingdom are stepping up cooperation on digital finance, backing the use of cross-border stablecoins under a new joint regulatory framework. The initiative aims to promote secure international payments while introducing stronger standards for reserves, investor protection, and oversight of stablecoin issuers. Then Japan, they've taken a major step towards mainstream crypto adoption, passing a law that reclassifies digital assets as financial assets. The move brings cryptocurrencies under stricter financial market regulations, including insider trading rules and tighter oversight over the sector. So those headlines right there in the crypto market. And that's our major markets looking for the midweek trade. We'll definitely give you more updates tomorrow, same time. Thank you for watching Business Incorporated. I'm Ladi Williams. Remain a team right here at Channels HQ. Bye for now.